My journey started on May 11, 1904, when I was born in Figueres, Spain. My name is Salvador Felipe Jacinto Dalí y Domenech, but most people refer to me as Dalí. My name comes from my brother, who died 9 months before I was born. My parents and I even believed I was my brother reincarnated. My dad is also a Salvador Dalí Cusi, and my mom is Felipa Domenech. My dad was a notary with a horrible temper, and I would get the worst of it. My mom, on the contrary, was comforting and kind, just like the household servants we had. I see myself as having a unique personality despite my mental disorders. Plus, my mustache is iconic. School for me was one of my worst enemies. Most of the time I daydreamed to pass the time. Being confined to a classroom limited all my creativity. I moved to Madrid to study art at the San Fernando Academy of Art, where I was expelled not once but twice. The first time was because I incited a student protest when Daniel Vasquez Diaz wasn't made a professor. Now, I admit that was definitely worth the expulsion, but telling the people who were going to give me a second chance that none of them were competent enough to judge me might not have been worthwhile. After the academy, I started portraying the art that I truly wanted to make, but people didn't quite agree with how dark and graphic my work became, so I started to be excluded from exhibitions. The only thing more famous than my mustache is some of my most famous works. Persistence of Memory, Disintegration of Persistence of Memory, Dream Caused by the Flight of a Bee Around a Pomegranate a Second Before Awakening, The Discovery of America by Christopher Columbus, Sleep, and the Face of War. To name a few. I use techniques like cubism, futurism, purism, and surrealism in most of my art. I was heavily influenced by Freud and his ideas of dream analysis. Some of my works were even connected too, like how the clock symbolized that time isn't rigid. I also use my disintegration of persistence of memory to symbolize the effect left by nuclear power and warfare left on the world. Conveying messages was one of my main reasons for creating art. And now to talk about my beautiful wife Gala Dalí, who some knew as Elena Ivanovna Diakonova. She was married when I met her and 10 years older than me, but it was love at first sight. Unfortunately, she met her demise at the age of 87. We both had a very bad case of the flu, and just months after, she started exhibiting signs of dementia and eventually died. I fell into a deep depression after this and didn't even think about producing art ever again. My final chapter began during the house fire in my castle in 1984. After this, I was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of my life. This tragic fire sent me back to my roots in Figueres, where I lived for the remainder of my life until I died of heart failure in my own Teatro Museo. I was 84 years old, and the legacy of Dalí lived on even after my death. There were many museums named after me, like the Dalí Museum and Dalí Alive 360 in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the Dalí House Museum in Catalonia, Spain. In fact, I was even buried under the Teatro Museo after my death.
Thank you for listening to my journal.